that they're always looking for a better job. And 97% said they're open to another job at any given time. So they may not be actively looking, but if one falls in their lap, they're open to it. So, just think about that for a minute. That almost 100% of your caregivers are open to taking another job. And that, it doesn't mean that, it's very different from other industries because caregivers are in such high demand that they can get a job anywhere. They don't have to be loyal, unfortunately. Not like in the old days. Here's another statistic. 32% of the caregivers working for you today interview every month with another company. And that means that they're going to hop in a car, get in a bus, a train, resume in hand, and go to another company to see what they're offering and how competitive their benefits and offering is. And it's not just other assisted living facilities that they're going to. As you well know, they're going to retail, they're going to fast food, hospitality, Amazon. So how do you compete, That is a good question, especially, as you've probably heard, Amazon has committed to offering a $15 minimum wage to any employee, regardless of whether they're full-time, part-time, temporary, seasonal, no matter what their job is or where they're located. And I read that Amazon is hiring in at least 6 locations in Colorado, including right here in Thornton. They're hiring 1,500 workers. So again, how do you compete, especially if you're dependent on the government reimbursement from Medicaid, and you can't match that hourly wage? The good news is that pay is not always the deciding factor. Again, part of their survey found that 42% of caregivers will choose a job based on these factors. Pay, yes, is a big one, but work hours is also big. Work location closest to their home, a company with a great reputation, and then the best benefits. And they do include training as an important benefit. And here's proof of that. In their survey, 85% of caregivers said they wanted more paid training opportunities. And 71% said they'll leave a job if there is no opportunity to learn new things. They're going to gravitate toward jobs where they can grow professionally and continue to expand their knowledge. So this really opens the door to using training as a recruitment tool. Caregivers also told my CNA jobs that on average they receive at least 3 calls a week for other jobs. And this number has held strong over the past 2 years that they've done this survey. So their phones are ringing, perhaps even while you're sitting here, the phone of your favorite caregiver is ringing and somebody's offering them another job. So what's the solution? Obviously, one important key is to look at recruiting as marketing and to really sell your training as a perk of employment. The most successful recruiters really describe their training opportunities in every job ad that they do, that they put out there. And it helps them keep a list of applicants ready and waiting, hopefully. Here are some other ways to recruit with training. Put your training provider's logo on your website. So if caregivers are checking you out and they see a logo of a training provider on your website, they're going to know that you are committed to offering training opportunities. You can put the phrase free training or paid training into recruitment ads. Another idea is to actually make an ad that looks like a coupon and make it good for X number of hours of training at such and such a place, such and such a date, and have them come in and do an hour or two of training and hopefully fill out an application, tour your facility. You can serve a snack, make it an event. In your ads, your recruitment ads, you can use testimonials from current customers about how the training of the employees has impacted their lives. You can ask your best caregivers for referrals. Maybe they have friends who would want to come and work for you. And one idea is to give them business cards, your employees, or postcards. And on those cards, tout your training opportunities. And then your employees can hand those cards out to their friends and help you get some good referrals for caregivers. You could advertise regular tours of your facility. So, have prospective caregivers come in just like you would a prospective resident and give them a tour, introduce them to some key staff members, a few residents, and then before they go, have them sit down and take a peek at your training. Especially if you offer online training, I think it's really, and you show them a tablet and show them how that works, I think it's kind of exciting for them. And advertise any advanced training that you offer. And we'll go into advanced training a little bit later. But I think that really attracts caregivers who are looking to grow in their career. So, okay, you've gotten people in the door, they've scheduled the interview. Now what? Keep talking about your training program during the interview. Make it an integral part of the interview. Ask applicants what they would really like to learn more about. Or even consider changing your application form and add a space where it says, what 3 things would you most like to learn about if you came to work here? This will help you kind of get some insight into them. And it also helps you know how to build up your own training library. Ask them about the last training they received. What was good about it, what was bad about it, and then compare it to what you have to offer. Let them know what they could expect by working for you. Have a current caregiver talk to applicants who come in to interview and let them know how they've progressed professionally by using your training program. And praise candidates who come in for any previous training that they've completed. Lets them know that you value them, you value their commitment to training. Okay, so you've gotten a few ideas how training can help you in the recruitment process. But what about when they've accepted the job? Let's take a peek at one more statistic. This one is from the 20th Annual Assisted Living Salary and Benefits Report. And they said the average turnover rate for CNAs in assisted living so far this year is 34.1%. And probably no surprise to all of you. And that's up from last year, 29.6%. And here's one more statistic from my CNA jobs. They found that 44% of caregivers cited a lack of training opportunities as the reason they left their last job. So obviously, the main tip for retaining caregivers is to invest in training. And I'm sure that you're all thinking about, we do provide training. We have to provide training. It's mandatory. Virtually every employer has some form of training, whether it's onboarding, some kind of orientation. But it often just meets the minimum requirements. And as we'll discuss, over the next few minutes, the minimum requirements don't really cover everything that caregivers want and need to know. It's businesses that embrace training as an ongoing process and a tool for employee empowerment, as Megan said, they'll really be able to remain competitive as the demand for caregivers and CNAs continues to rise. Okay, so when I talk to administrators about training, which I do every day, I usually hear one of two extremes, and it's really almost funny that it's almost always these two extremes. So I hear this: you got to be kidding! Training is just a waste of time. It's a waste of money. My caregivers don't even bother to finish the courses, or they do finish the training and then they just quit and they go somewhere else. So that's one extreme that I hear. And then the other is, oh my gosh, yes, training is the key. It's how we keep our employees and our residents reap the benefits. So when I think about this, what it makes me ponder is this old adage you've probably heard. The only thing worse than training employees and having them leave is not training them and having them stay. So a crucial way to retain caregivers is to create a terrific orientation program. Orientation is your first chance to really mold your new hires into the team you want. And I usually don't dwell on the negative. I'm kind of a Pollyanna, but I think it's important to kind of look at the typical mistakes that seem to happen with an orientation program that can make it bomb with new employees. So I'll go deeper into each of these mistakes in a minute, but just a quick review. The number 4 mistake. Your orientation's all about the company. It's not about the employee. Most companies start by talking about the company culture and the mission statement, and it just seems sort of like a natural place to start. But best practices say that is no longer true. And we'll talk about that. The number 3 mistake, orientation tends to be an information dump. Just kind of like these conferences, where you just take in all this information and it's dumped on you and you can't retain it all, and who could? So orientations often tend to be that way. And we'll talk about how to prevent that. The number 2 mistake is organizations don't provide any opportunities for employees to really engage with their coworkers, their peers. And so that's where a preceptor or a peer mentor can really come into play. And the number 1 mistake organizations make is just having no plan at all. So, as far as solutions to orientation mistakes, remember number 4, that was to shift the focus. I'm guilty. I've done orientations in the past for my employees where I start off talking about the company, but really what the message you're giving employees then is, boy, you should be glad we hired you. Now behave the way we want you to behave. So, best practices really is now to just turn that around. Engage the employee, get to know them as a person first, and then talk about, code of conduct and company culture. You have to at some point. But start by getting to know the person first, making them feel really special on day 1. You can do that with any kind of introductory activity, icebreaker activity. But there's one company that found that in a study I read from MIT that they reduced their turnover by 47% by just turning their orientation around and focusing on the employee first. An activity that I like to do is the head, heart, and hand. No, head, hands, and heart. And that's where you give the employees a piece of paper, 3 columns, head, hands, and heart, And it's in the head column, you tell them to write things that they really know a lot about. And the hands, really things they're good at doing. And the heart, things that they're really passionate about. And it doesn't have to be work-related. In fact, it's probably better if it isn't. But it really gives you insights into your new employees. And then, when everybody has finished, if you're doing a group, if they've finished filling that out, have them share and really get to know and bond with each other. Okay, solution number 3, that was that information dump. The solution is don't dump BABE, and BABE stands for the brain can only absorb what the butt can endure. So the key there is to chunk it out, do chunks of learning, or micro-learning is the it's kind of the buzzword these days. And just talk about one topic or one skill at a time, then let them talk back to you about it or return the skill or whatever is involved before you move on to the next area. And stretch it out over a couple of days, as long as you can. Give breaks so people don't fall asleep. And present the material in various formats. Here's where you could use, yes?
Sorry, I didn't cut you off.
No.
Do you have a suggestion? I've read different things on how long someone absorbs learning before they should take a break.
Half hour? Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you. If you present the material in various formats, it kind of lends itself to stopping, in about half an hour. You could do some things as a live session, instructor-led live session. You can do e-learning courses that you can assign and they can do on their own time and sort of pace themselves and not have to listen to anybody else. And then you can also do things that are active, like a skills performance, so that they're up moving around. So just try to vary it in as many ways as you can. And for solution number 2, that was providing no opportunities to engage with the rest of the staff, as you recall. So really the solution is to have a mentor. Do all of you do mentors or preceptors? Anybody? You do? Yeah. I mean, I really firmly believe in the power of that. I remember when I first got to Duke University as a nurse, and I was on this, busy research oncology floor, and I had no preceptor, no help, and when I asked for help, they said, "Look, we don't have time to help you. You're just filling a spot in the schedule, so just get on with it and don't bother us." And I quit within, a month or so and went to a different unit at the hospital. So, there's a lot to be said for precepting. For new caregivers who've never done the work before, a mentor can really ease the transition into the new job, help them model problem solving and clinical skills, and really help navigate the emotional aspects of caregiving. Because if you're new to it, you don't really know what you're getting into in that regard. And I think having a preceptor to talk to about that is really helpful. And for seasoned caregivers who've been around but they're new to your facility, a mentor can offer support, answer questions, and help introduce the new employee to the rest of the team. Now remember, the number one complaint from new hires about orientation is that there was just no plan at all. Maybe you have a general idea how your orientation should go. You've got, some of the puzzle pieces that you've put together. But unless you really have a plan, it can seem disjointed and unorganized and kind of uninspired. And that's not going to set the stage for your employee to hang in there with you. So how do you plan an orientation? Some of you may have noticed that within your booklet that we made for you, there is a report on orientation. So we did print that out for you. But I think it's important first to know what's required. You got to know the regulations We'll talk about that in a minute as far as Colorado goes. You've got to, there we go. Nope. Too soon. Almost there. But it's important to go above and beyond, in my opinion, the regulations. And that's where you offer advanced training or offer ongoing continuing education, excuse me. It really sets you apart from your competition if you offer advanced training. And again, like we said, plan breaks, give them some downtime, bring in the mentors, serve some healthy snacks or meals, and follow up. That's really key. A lot of places have no structure for following up after an orientation. And I think that's really important. We've talked to a lot of facilities lately who are doing stay interviews. So like once a quarter, they'll do an interview with their existing caregivers and ask them what it would take to keep, what's it going to take to keep you here? And, have some back and forth. Now, obviously, look, I know you guys, especially after listening to the panel talk, that you're loaded with bureaucracy and, paperwork, and doing these stay interviews take a lot of time, but so does recruiting and interviewing new employees. So maybe you could even put a really good caregiver in charge of those stay interviews, and they could interview their peers and again give the feedback to you. But the bottom line is that orientation is really a key part of retention because you're setting the stage from day number one.
I was just going to say one thing before you move on.
Yeah.
As far as breaking it down appropriately, I think it's about the areas of study or the applicable topics and putting it in a format to where they can digest one certain part of it at one time versus, like Linda was talking about, dumping it on them and really making sure that they understand each individual part, whatever's prevalent or relevant for the orientation as you go. I mean, in terms of how you would break that down or the timeline, how you would break that down, it may vary, but making sure that it's segmented kind of appropriately for them to retain it.
Well, and to that end, when we design our e-learning courses, we have a chunk of information and then we have knowledge checks to check their retention of the information. So it's, even though it's one course, it's done in chunks. And they can stop and pause and come back to it later and pick up where they left off. So it is micro-learning in a sense. Okay, so obviously you want to plan your orientation to include the training required for Colorado. And Gary has been working really hard with input from some of you and then also with our regulatory expert at In the Know, and has come up with something for you, and he's going to talk about it.
Yeah. So you guys all should have these in the bags that were handed out. And like we talked about, obviously there's some new regs coming into effect. Some of the first sweeping reform in quite a while. So there's basically an orientation, and as far as initial training goes, there's an orientation and within 30 days. So a certain, not necessarily hours of required training that these caregivers or these people have to take, but areas of study. As Megan was talking about, person-centered care, client-centered care is one of those things. So it's something that you have to now, or will have to now, divulge that to them in the beginning. And then there's also, as far as, infection control and secure unit training, ongoing training, both initial and ongoing, that's going to be implemented as well. If you're looking at that pamphlet, the 25.14, the section, is the section on secure environment training, and there actually is an hour requirement for that. So there's an 8-hour requirement, and there's a whole list of areas of study or topics that they need to cover. And so what we did was I worked with Megan, and she listened to me ladder on and asked her a million questions, and also Corky and Carol Marks as well. And we went through and we just basically lined up everything that we offer that lines up with what those new regulations are. So we do have the e-learning format. We also offer instructional material as well, newsletter printout where you can have them in a classroom and come in and have somebody lead the class, have group activities. So what we see a lot with our clients is they'll do basically a blended approach. And so with that orientation, they'll have that in person and some of that initial stuff, and then for the ongoing, they'll use more of the e-learning. You guys have a distinct advantage over home care because you have them in a facility, so you get a lot of touch points with them, but with that orientation and the initial, it's good to get a grasp of their knowledge. And I think one of the main points is engagement, right? What they're actually retaining, so you can understand what they're absorbing and kind of tackle that in the beginning. And then as far as the ongoing goes, have some more of that done online. But these are the new regs. And I'm not sure, Lyle was speaking, I know on July 1 was when it was passing, and there's kind of been a stay when everybody needs to be in compliance. But sooner than later, these are kind of things that are going to come down just as far as from a compliance standpoint. Any questions?
Yeah, anybody have questions about those?
Thank you for putting us together. Like, this is amazing.
I'm serious.
I mean, this is way, even like, sorry, but it's better than what the department.
I was on the phone with Megan one day for like an hour, and she was like, I don't know, those are just great questions. Like, they don't tell us any of that. We're not sure, But this is in terms of lining it up. This is kind of right down the path or lined up accordingly. If you think of things, obviously we're at vendor booth A, so I mean, some of this can be a little more complex. So if you want to have a little bit more one-on-one discussion, that's certainly fine as well. And my contact information is on there if you want to shoot me an email.
But we do, our online program has more than 125 courses, so we didn't want you to have to jumble through those to figure out which ones met your requirements. So that's why, we were quite insistent that we put this together for you. And whether you use us or somebody else, at least you now know the topics that you're going to need to look for.
That's a great news. So, Gary, this is this 8 hour live, or is it some live and some online?
There's no standard by which you deliver it, at least to my knowledge. Although they haven't said, you have to do a certain amount in person or a certain amount online. There are certainly across the country governing bodies that say that, but as far as the CPHE goes, they haven't said. So
you can choose.
You can pick and choose.
Yeah.
Again,
but we have both.
Yeah. Typically, the orientation is more live, and then we could get a feel for the employee, and then once they have established themselves a little bit as far as the ongoing, you can do a little bit more of that online.
But even with the orientation, you could assign homework, as it were. Our classic instructor-led courses are, as Gary alluded to, they're written like sort of like a newsletter. Lots of graphics, lots of interesting stuff in them. But those can be given as self-study packets. There's a 10-question quiz that they could then take and as a group or take and give it back to you to score. The beauty of the online is that it's scored online and you don't have to fuss with it. Saves you a little time there. But the content is the same between our instructor-led courses and the online courses. The content for each course is the same.
In terms of what they're going to be learning. And a little bit off the path, if you do have CNAs or those who have the CEU requirements to renew their license, this will serve for that as well.
Yeah.
So they can definitely use that. And that's definitely a recruitment tool too.
So just lately, I've been realizing it seems like, and it never happened before, but some of my newer staff have dyslexia or they have learning disabilities of various kinds. And so I try, maybe kind of sneakily, to figure out if they can understand reading, even online or in a book, and click on the right answer. And I think we're okay so far, but is there a way, I don't have an education background, is there a way you can kind of gear things towards, is there a question I can ask that say, do you like reading? Would that be okay? Do you like to read, or is that?
You could ask, how about asking something like, see if any of you agree, how about asking something like, what's your favorite book that you read recently? And see, well, but you're trying,
Reading.
Maybe the question more of like,
bureaucratic learning style, you know, like.
Sure. If you're trying to get at the learning style. Yeah,
Well, to that point, the online courses are narrated.
are narrated.
Yeah, so we actually have an in-house, we have an in-house.
They
production
can,
team.
yes.
So the PDF, they'll be reading it and the.
Correct.
They'll have the text, but again, we have an in-house production team and they
Right.
they live narrate that.
So if reading is not their forte, then at least they're hearing it and seeing it, so it may improve their reading.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody else?
Okay. If you think of questions later, just grab one of us at the booth, or as Gary said. Okay, so what training do caregivers want? We did a poll recently of about 3,000 caregivers, and I mean, not a huge sample, but a good enough one, and asked them what they wanted to learn more about. 63%, as you can see, wanted more on Alzheimer's and dementia care. Almost half on abnormal observations. Over a third dealing with difficult clients. 22% for both end-of-life care and safe lifting. 19% nutrition, 16% ADLs, and 10% handling conflict in the workplace. But the thing that really surprised us is that almost half, 49%, said they wanted all of the above, that they needed more on all of the above. So they're eager for more knowledge. Okay, so, have any of you ever found yourself in a dead-end job? I mean, most of us have at some point in our lives. And, what do we tend to do? We tend to quit as quickly as we can. And unfortunately, caregiving can be seen as a dead-end job. And then what happens? The caregiver quits. You've got another opening to fill. But remember, we talked about that statistic that 44% of caregivers will leave a job that's not offering them any learning opportunities. And that's where we feel that the advanced training that I mentioned briefly earlier can come in. And that's training that goes beyond the minimum requirements so that caregivers can really grow professionally in their field and really turn their job into a career. So advanced training would be, like you all of a sudden your staff become the Alzheimer's experts in the market, or the palliative care pros, or the best in behavioral health. And you do this by training your caregivers with a curriculum that either you develop or that you purchase from a training provider that gives them targeted training in a specific topic or topics, and based on your population, your demographic for your residents. But either way you do it, the training goes above and beyond the minimum, keeps your caregivers engaged and hopefully retained at your community. And as a bonus, you can market the fact that you have advanced trained caregivers to your referral sources on your website, to potential residents and their family members. There are other ways to use training as a recruitment tool. Back to the mentorship, I can't help it. I just, I think that's really, really key.
Do you have like a formal outline program, recommendation, trainer?
We have a course called Being a Preceptor that teaches a caregiver how to take on that role. Mm-hmm. We can show it to you later.
Do you have that like in written form, or is the class reaction 10? Do you have like a written manual?
Oh, well, that course that I just mentioned would be for the caregiver, him or herself, to learn how to become an excellent peer mentor. But if you're talking about creating a program, I believe one of our reports has that in it. Let me see if I can find it. If not, we'll create one. Yeah, because the free reports that you have in your booklet or free report, we have about 15 or 20 of them on our website that are available for download. We just want to educate people as much as we can, and so they're all free. So offer a career ladder that's tied to training. So for example, after X number of hours of training, you might put staff, senior staff, or some other title, senior caregiver, to their title. And it helps them feel special. If you can afford a little bump in salary with it, fine. If not, a lot of them will respond just to the title itself. Holding regular skills fairs, and have your top caregivers pick which skills they want to demonstrate, and then have those as the featured skills. That really helps keep people engaged and keeps training going. How about reimbursing tuition for advanced training? Maybe you have some caregivers who want to become CNAs, but they can't afford it. If you can reimburse them for their tuition to go and get that CNA training, you will not only benefit from their advanced skills, but you'll probably earn their loyalty to your facility as well. And I think recognizing training achievements is also really important. You can do this with individual rewards and incentives. Offer your caregivers a treat for completing their annual training. Whether it's a pair of movie tickets or a little gift card to Starbucks or whatever. It doesn't have to be much. But just some sort of recognition of their achievement. Sure.
So I think probably a lot of us try to incorporate like staff meetings and trainings like into one thing once a month, 1 hour, a lot of times. And I just feel like now we have so much care planning to go over and all the new rules and regs at our meetings that we don't really have time to do the training. So I started assigning training at meetings, and then by the next meeting they had to come with that training completed. Well, I was kind of running into with that one administrator saying, well, I give it to them, but they wouldn't complete it. Well, then I was like, what am I going to do to them? Right?
You mean punish? Oh.
So then this last meeting, I brought gift certificates and movie tickets, the things that I know like interest them, and I did a raffle. Well, then once they found out I had a raffle, some of them started getting on their phones at the meeting trying to like finish their no, that's not happening. But then I told them what we're going to have as the next raffle.
Uh-huh.
And I guarantee I have a lot more people. And then what I thought of is the people that don't complete their training, one, they're not getting paid for their time, because I do pay for their time that they do it on site. And number two, they aren't going to benefit from the raffles.
Right.
So they're lost, and the ones that want to have the growth, the ones that want the reward, they will do it. The other ones, there's not much I can
Right.
do. So
Right. No, that's awesome. Yeah. No, you're way ahead of me. Kind of the group reward thing is similar to that. Now, have you thought about? There's two ways to look at this. You don't want to embarrass anybody, but you can also do group rewards. If everybody finishes their training, we're going to have like a catered lunch or, some kind of outing after hours or something. And that's another way to do it. And some administrators will put up in a public area, not for the public, but for the employees to see, public employee area, who's finished. And it's sort of peer pressure to, come on, you're holding us back from this catered lunch. So that's an idea, but that's a little bit on the punitive side. So, yeah, it just depends on what your group responds to. And again, what I was going to speak to here, Megan is ahead of me, is a raffle. Same thing. For every course they complete, they get a ticket to the raffle. And at the end of a quarter or end of the year, that you draw. And it doesn't have to be a huge prize. A Visa gift card for a little bit, or whatever your staff tends to respond to. And of course, there's always just praise and gratitude, which are free. Everybody likes to be praised for their achievements and to be recognized for their achievements. And a lot of caregivers will say that it means more to them hearing good things from their supervisor than anything else. And it can be public praise if some people respond to that, but also a handwritten note that you mail to the caregiver saying, congratulations on completing your targeted training or your compliance training. That can really mean a lot. Then their family sees it, they can show it, it's just a source of pride. Okay, so you're probably thinking, this sounds great, but it's too expensive. Training, I can't afford any more training. It's interesting because in preparing for this, I realized that it's really kind of difficult to get a traditional budget for training for assisted living. The data just doesn't exist. Maybe it goes along with how we were saying on the panel that things have been quiet, until now, and now you all have a voice. But there really wasn't a lot of data about how much training should cost. But if we look at sort of all industries in general, the typical thing is 2 to 2.5% of the budget should go to training. So if we do the math on that, if you're a facility with, say, $1 million of revenue, and you've got 20 caregivers, that's $20,000 a person per year. So obviously that's not realistic. We've got to find a training budget that works for you. So we asked recently 300 healthcare industry leaders how much they thought a company should spend on annual training to retain caregivers. And the answers were kind of interesting. 56% said between $10 and $100 per caregiver per year. But the rest said more than that. And in fact, 25% said it should be $500 to $1,000 per caregiver per year. That's a lot of money. So the good news, as far as we're concerned, is that professionally prepared training really doesn't have to cost you that much. For example, I can't speak to other companies, but for us, the average, depending on how many learners you have, how many caregivers you have, the average administrator would pay about $49 per caregiver per year for our training, which includes, as I said, more than 125 e-learning courses, and also any targeted training, advanced specialist training that you might want. If you wanted also the PDF, the instructor-led courses, that would be an additional cost. Although we are trying to work something out with Corky, so. And then also you save time because you're not having to manually grade tests or manually file papers. All of the administrative aspect of your training is online on the system. You can pull out reports, you can show a surveyor, Jane Doe has completed this many courses this year, or you can say this many employees have completed the infection control. You can pull it up, reports up any way you want. So excuse me. So the Bureau of Labor Statistics estimates it costs about 25% of an employee's salary to replace them. So if you've got a caregiver earning $20,000, it could cost up to $5,000 to replace that person. So obviously, I mean, if you do the math, it seems like it's better to try to retain them with $49 per year than it is to try to replace them with $5,000 a year. Investing in initial and ongoing training, whether it's e-learning or instructor-led learning or learning that you create yourselves, it's an important retention tool. We applaud all efforts at training. And especially when you go beyond the minimum compliance requirements. And focusing on training, like I said, can benefit your facility as well, because you can market yourself as experts. You can market the training as a perk of employment for your caregivers. And your referral sources will understand that you have a commitment to training that is valuable to their clients, their patients. Okay, if you have more questions, we're certainly happy to, let's see what time it is.
3:10.
Okay, we speak again at 3:30, so. But we have a few minutes if anyone has any more questions. Otherwise, you can certainly find us at our booth, which is number 8. Yes?
What have you found the next wave of training going? Is it still more online? Is it interactive? What are you finding and seeing?
You mean interactive in person? Or we really believe that the best practice is a blended, where you do some of each. And that seems to be where most thought leaders say